Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit further about the idea that a calorie is a calorie and why people don't really grasp this or fully understand it correctly sometimes. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Now, what people need to understand is that this isn't just some outdated theory. This is something that has been proven and been validated in laboratories more and more and more in recent years. It's been found to be even more true with stronger amounts of evidence supporting it than there has been evidence the other direction. The amount of evidence is showing the other direction has reduced with modern testing. And this creates a lot of confusion because people don't understand when we say a calorie is a calorie. Yes, that absolutely means that if you're in a caloric deficit, it doesn't actually matter where you get your calories from. You are going to lose tissue weight in your body. Some type of tissue weight. Doesn't mean it's going to be all fat. It can be muscle tissue. It can be muscle glycogen. It could be organ weight. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on there. But you will lose tissue weight if you're eating less calories than you burn, and you will gain tissue weight if you eat more calories than you burn. And it doesn't matter what percentage of carbs, fat, protein, all of that is in the mix. But that's not to say that those things don't affect what type of tissue it is. And that's the important point. But when people tell you that they gained or lost more weight, significantly more, even with largely different calories and stuff involved with when they either shifted their carbohydrates or fat, that's not how it works when we study it. That's their perception, but when you put them in a laboratory, that's not how it actually works. Now, invariably, what you get when you try to say something like that, you will get people who come forward and say something like, well, if that's the case, you're telling me that you could just eat 1,500 calories of table sugar every day and lose weight? Yeah, that is what I'm telling you, but for someone's mind to go in that direction, you have to step back and ask, how sane is this person? And the person who asked that question, you should probably really step back and assess what you just asked. Because, yeah, that actually would happen, but it would be really, really, really fucking stupid to try it. It would be really, really stupid. And it's not like people only do this in diet stuff, because I run a couple different YouTube channels with different topics. I get the same sort of stupid ass questions on gun stuff too. Case in point, the exact same sort of argument gets brought up when I talk about wound ballistics from different bullets, what they do in human tissue, animal tissue, ballistics gel testing. People will, when you say something isn't that great, it's stopping humans who want to hurt you, that it's probably not your best choice. People will invariably say, well, I like it, and you know, why don't you volunteer to get shot with one to show how it's not that great? Well, that would be stupid because no one wants to get shot with any bullet. What are you talking about? I mean, what sort of stupid statement is that? That still doesn't prove that that should be your best choice. That still wouldn't be my first choice to defend my life with. Wouldn't be my first choice to hunt an animal with either. But the sort of logic that people will use like that, it's the same sort of logic. Like, would it be your first choice to try an all-sugar diet? Because let me explain how that would work. Yes, as long as you could sustain the diet, you would absolutely lose weight. If you were in a 1,000-calorie deficit while eating a pure sugar diet, you would lose a couple pounds every single week. And you wouldn't quit losing weight on that for a very, very long time. Now, number one, it will eventually kill you, because that is a completely deficient diet. It's deficient in protein, it's deficient in essential fatty acids, it's deficient in vitamins and minerals. I'm not even sure how long you would live on that diet. I don't think it would be an incredibly long time. It would kill you eventually. You would die on that diet. You know what? Just like I would die if I volunteered to get shot with a bullet that's less than an ideal bullet for killing people. That's a really risky, stupid thing to do. Just like eating an all-table sugar diet is a really stupid and risky thing to do. Now, number two, the thing to consider is that it's not sustainable either. That's the other point we come around to. That is why different people drift towards different diets, because the diet is sustainable for them. And a lot of people think they did a different type of diet. They'll claim, I did this type of diet, and I gained weight in a calorie deficit, or I couldn't lose weight. No, you weren't in a calorie deficit then. You weren't able to sustain a calorie deficit in that diet because it didn't work appropriately for your appetite or for your energy levels. That's all it was. Or maybe you made really, really bad food choices within the confines of that diet. Maybe you picked foods that don't give you the best energy, or foods that don't fill you up very well, like table sugar. I mean, let's be realistic here. Table sugar has an insanely low satiety. There are other carbohydrates that have 5 to 10 times the satiety factor for the same amount of calories. Does that mean that all carbs are bad for losing weight? No, but table sugar would be the last choice of one I would eat. So, case in point, low satiety. But when it comes to actual calories in, calories out, none of that changes. Some diets just give you better energy than others based upon some individual factors in your biology and your lifestyle. Some diets give people better appetite control than others, and that is going to vary a bit from person to person. There are good explanations for why, but that's another topic. But that is true. Its satiety varies a bit on different diet types. Some people do really well on really starchy, high-carb diets as far as feeling full on a given amount of calories. Other people have better appetite control on a ketogenic diet and just forget to eat for 8 hours straight. Because that sort of diet suppresses their appetite. But it's still calorie deficit, and here's what I mean. People actually think sometimes that these different diets will let you just expend large amounts of unused calories for some reason, and that's not the case. There are cases where they can expend some calories. There are some random weird situations that I'm not going to get into in this metabolic tricks you could play over very short periods of time. You can waste large amounts of calories. But if you think you're going to do it for a week straight, you're going to gain a couple pounds of fat in that week if you try something like that. But that being said, here's how it works. Your body burns what you feed it first. And that's the problem people run into. They'll think, well, if my body's burning more fat because I'm eating more fat, then I'm going to lose more fat. No. Your body burns the fuel that you put in your mouth first, what it has easily available, because the stuff that's already stored, your body fat that's stored, your body's going to tap into that as a little bit more of a last resort. You have to create a need for that. Your body doesn't want to get rid of that fat that's tucked away. It's going to burn what you just fed it preferentially. So if you eat a large amount of carbohydrates, that's actually your body's preferred fuel source. In fact, your body will make carbohydrates out of other stuff. Your body can make a little bit of carbs out of fat. It can convert about half of the protein that you eat into carbs, and most people, it ends up converting a good chunk of the protein that you eat into carbs. Most people who eat really high protein diets, it's just expensive carbohydrates. But metabolically expensive carbohydrates, because there's an energy cost to the conversion. But if you're eating carbs, that's what your body's going to burn first. And when people say, well, the insulin causes you to store fat, well, that's true in the sense of insulin is what shuttles the carbohydrates into your muscle cells, right? Higher insulin levels, carbohydrates going to the muscle cells, you're burning carbohydrates, right? Well, if you're burning carbohydrates and you have extra fat left over, you're going to store it. If you're burning carbohydrates and you don't have enough carbohydrates to fuel your metabolism and activity for the day, what happens? Your body will be burning the dietary fat you eat also, and that's usually what happens for most people. When you're at a neutral body weight, your body's burning through the carbs and fat that you eat. It's pretty well using up what you eat for metabolic purposes, rebuilding purposes, everything else, and then you kind of stay neutral. But when it burns through this stuff that you have already eaten, then it will tap into other sources. All right, we'll tap into other fuel sources, sometimes muscle glycogen, liver glycogen, and of course body fat, and it all depends on what's going on there. All right, but what happens then, because people will say, okay, well, if you eat less carbohydrates, your insulin is lower. Well, no, unless if you're not eating a lot of protein, because protein has an insulin response too. And when you eat excess protein, what happens? Your body, first of all, converts up to about half of the protein you eat in the liver into glucose, shuttles it out, and you need insulin to deal with that also. Your body then burns that for fuel. It will also burn some of the protein directly. It can oxidate protein and burn that as a fuel source. If it has a lot of it available, it'll go ahead and do that. And in either case, what happens to the extra fat you eat? Your body stores it as body fat. And people need to remember that. Your body doesn't actually store protein or glucose as body fat very easily. It does, but in very rare circumstances. It's not really an issue for most people who exercise a little bit and who are somewhat active. You are probably never going to store a significant amount of the carbs or protein that you eat as body fat. You will store them as glucose. You'll store them as muscle glycogen. You'll store them as liver glycogen. You're not readily going to store it. And the excess carbs that you eat, your body stores, but it stores it as glucose. or is glycogen, more specifically, sorry. Glucose was not the correct set of molecules here. It will store that. In that way, the excess fat gets stored as fat. Now, where ketogenic diet advocates come up with this idea is that, well, if you just don't eat very much protein and you drop your carbs ultra low, you're just eating fat, your body's burning fat as fuel, and there's no insulin to cause the storage of the extra fat you eat. Well, you don't need the insulin. Insulin doesn't cause your body doesn't store the fat that you eat. That's not the purpose of it. That's not what it's doing there. That's a misconception. It causes your body to burn the carbohydrates that you're eating. That's what the insulin is doing. If there is no insulin present, or you're dead if there's no insulin present. Let's be honest here. If insulin levels are circulating fairly low, because you're not eating much carbohydrate or protein, your body switches over and burns the fat that you're eating. Well, let me ask you the question, what difference is there in terms of weight loss if you're burning through 1,000 calories of carbs that you ate in the first 2 meals of the day versus 1,000 calories of the fat that you ate in the first 2 meals? How does that help your fat loss? The net effect is the same. You're still burning 1,000 calories of the stuff that you just put in your mouth. Your body doesn't need insulin to store the fat that you eat in your ass. Okay, it can go straight to your fat ass with low circulating insulin. Insulin doesn't cause fat to be stored directly. It causes it to be stored indirectly because it makes you burn the glucose. But if there's no glucose there and there's plenty of fat there, it doesn't need it. You just burn the fat that you eat and then you store the excess also. And that's been found to be true in labs. You store the extra fat no matter what. And this idea, where they get this from is that, well, you reach the ketogenic state and you're excreting large amounts of unburned ketones. No, it's not large amounts, it's very small amounts. Now, they get this model from the state called ketoacidosis, which is something that can happen to type 1 diabetics. And when type 1 diabetics do this, they don't bypass calories in, calories out. Their calories out go way up. They urinate and they poop out calories. They excrete calories out of their body that are not burned in the form of glucose because their blood sugar goes up and it gets excreted, right? Ketones in their bloodstream, which is partially burned fat molecules, they excrete and waste it, and they will lose weight rapidly, but it can also kill you and cause organ damage. Right? The idea of the ketogenic diet that some has, well, maybe the same thing happens in ketosis. Well, when we study it, no, it actually doesn't. It's just a few calories. It's not a lot. You're talking 10, 20, 30 calories get excreted if ketones in your urine. And that's not my opinion. That's the lab studies done on it. Your and my opinion is irrelevant there. This is something that we can measure in a lab and has been measured in a lab. So there's no metabolic advantage there. Well, by that same token, you'll have really crazy high-carb people, usually vegans, but not always, and not all vegans believe this, that you can eat unlimited carbs. Because why? Let's go back to the other thing I just said. Your body stores excess fat that you eat and very rarely stores glucose directly as body fat. So the other alternative then, this is the other extreme of the theory, where calories don't matter. Well, if you're not eating very much fat, there's nothing for you to store. So unlimited carbs can be eaten and you still won't gain fat and you won't have trouble losing fat. Well, here's the problem with that theory. You're eating tons of carbohydrates. Your body doesn't need to burn fat. Why should it? You're giving it everything it needs in the form of carbohydrates. And what are you going to do? Eat a zero-fat diet? You'll die. If you eat a zero-fat diet, you will die of nutritional deficiency. Well, that's a good way to lose weight. That is true. So I guess they're actually right. Nutritional deficiency from it could kill you, and once you die and start decomposing, you drop body fat really, really fast. You drop weight and fat really fast once you die. But barring that, while you're still alive, it's not going to work that way. It's not going to work that way at all. Because you're giving it everything it needs. Why does it need to burn fat off as a fuel source at that point? It has all the carbs it needs. And you're still going to be eating some fat. Usually your baseline, most people need about 18 grams of fat to not die. That's your bare minimum to keep yourself alive in the long term. Even 30 grams of fat is a really, really, really low-fat diet. Well, what happens when you're not burning that 30 grams of fat you eat on that really low-fat diet? Well, you're going to store it. Let's do the math on that. Let's assume you only burn 10 out of those grams for metabolic functions and essential fatty acids or whatever, and you got 20 grams of that. Well, really, really ultra low-fat diet left. 20 grams, right? Times 30. That's 600 grams a month of fat that you can store. That's a pound. So if you're eating a caloric surplus on a really, really low-fat diet, high-carb diet, you could still gain a pound of fat every month. Now, that's a really low rate. I mean, you could overeat a decent amount and do that, but you're still gaining fat. And people say, well, what happens to the calories there? Well, yeah, when you're eating really high carbs, you do tend to burn off the extra carbs as energy, and we do know that. The studies show that. It does have a thermic effect. So but you're still burning them, and we do know higher carb diets have a slightly higher thermic effect. They have a positive metabolic effect, but it's pretty small unless you excessively overeat them. Now, if you excessively overeat them, you still won't store any for a day or two. But you will start storing them eventually, and it will build up. But the other point is, if you're only eating a small deficit of carbs like that, and you're eating 30 grams of fat a day, and say 20 of it's still circulating around to be stored, that's a pound of fat every month. Yeah, it's less fat than you would gain on a higher fat diet, but it's still fat. You're gaining fat. It's unavoidable. When you eat in a caloric surplus, you are invariably going to gain some body fat. When you eat in a caloric deficit consistently, you're going to lose some body fat. There's no way around it, and this has been confirmed in study after study after study when we look at controlled studies. Ultimately, the only difference it comes down to here as far as different diet breakdowns is going to be energy, health, how good you feel on it, and how well does it control your appetite. And that's a highly individual thing. And that big one, that appetite control on the end, that is the biggest factor that causes the confusion of why some people feel like they gain or lose weight easier on a given diet. But it's not because of the calories. It's because of their ability to control the calories more. And that is what it comes down to. It's still calories in and calories out. Just some diet types are far easier than others for some individuals to adhere to and to maintain control of their intake. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.